I'm hitting the trail. It's time to do some talking. I'm gonna find me a honky-tonk hero with a story to tell. We'll have a chuckle. You never know, you might learn something. I'm hitting the trail. It's time to do some talking. I'm hitting the trail. It's time to do some talking.
You're listening to Tales from the Trail, brought to you by Cowboys and Indians Magazine. Now here's your host, Tyler Gummersall.
Welcome to this edition of Tales from the Trail. I'm visiting with my friend Nick Forster up in Boulder, Colorado. Nick is a great musician and radio host and just all-around good guy, making the world a better place out there. He's been in a band called Hot Rize for many years. If you don't know about Hot Rize, they're a great bluegrass band. They formed in, I believe, the late 70s, early 80s, out in Colorado, and to me became one of the biggest and most formative bluegrass bands of the 20th century. They're IBMA award-winning, Grammy-nominated. The most recent lineup includes Tim O'Brien and Pete Wernick on banjo and Brian Sutton on guitar, and then Nick playing bass. They're all incredible musicians in their own right, and when they get together and play, it's a special thing. I got to see them a couple years ago at the Station Inn in Nashville, and Dierks Bentley was even there in the audience wearing his little Hot Rize t-shirt, so even the big old celebrities are fans. Anyhow, they've got 6 studio albums. They played all over the world. And in addition to being a part of that, Nick also founded eTown with his wife Helen Forster, and that is a nationally syndicated nonprofit radio program. They're on over 300 stations every week. I've been doing it since 1991. I've had some very big guests, and I grew up listening to that show. It's a great, positive show featuring music and good positive ideas. So pretty special. So we talk about that radio show. We talk about Hot Rize. Just talk about music in general, wisdom, etc. So I hope you enjoy it.
Professional.
Yes, I am.
Thanks for doing this.
You're welcome.
I appreciate it.
No problem.
I think, I'm sure in the intro, I will have already talked about all the amazing accolades of Hot Rize, Nick Forster, and some of eTown stuff. But I'm kind of curious about, so the Hot Rize journey to begin with. You guys started in late 70s, early 80s?
78.
78.
Yeah.
Okay. And it was a little bit different because you play electric bass.
Yeah.
So you're a pioneer kind of in that realm in bluegrass, I would say.
You know, there were others actually in that time frame,
Yeah.
but it was certainly, it was a bit of a, the Osborne brothers were using electric bass, Jim and Jesse were using electric bass, Newgrass Revival had electric bass, Doyle, Austin, and Quicksilver had electric bass. But it was early enough to where I'd still get booed when I brought my amp on stage at a bluegrass festival in Hugo, Oklahoma, and other places, you know.
Yeah. Well, because, not too long before that, probably, that Dylan had that whole thing with going electric, right? And that was not so
Yeah,
well
10
received.
years earlier or a little more.
Yeah.
But the idea is, in a way, it has to do with being from Colorado.
Yeah.
So we, I think I'm going to sneeze. I'll sneeze 5 times for some reason.
Wow. That's interesting.
Little known fact.
Good luck, I guess.
Little known fact, but if you were to ask anybody who works at eTown or was ever in a Hot Rise,
You sneeze 5
how many times has Nick sneezed? Oh, 5. It was a funny thing. To back up a little bit, I came to Denver in 75.
Okay.
And I worked at a music store called the Denver Folklore Center.
Yeah.
And what was really interesting is that the Denver Folklore Center was sort of based on similar organizations in New York and Chicago, the New York Folklore Center and the Old Town School of Folk Music. But it became a little broader in my experience, only because of the fact that we were in Colorado and there was an interest in country music and singer-songwriters and Western music and there were the Zanzibar and there was country bars that were happening and so there was there was a diverse scene that went well beyond just singer-songwriters or people playing the folk circuit.
Yeah.
So I started out by getting sort of immersed in this great community that was all about a variety of different styles of music, and I was in a lot of bands, and I was playing. My first band was actually with a bunch of Texans, Jimmy Dale Gilmore,
Really?
and David Halley.
Wow.
Yeah,
And here in Denver?
yeah, the whole
Really
bunch of people from Austin moved to Denver in the '70s. We were actually all sort of following the same guru. We were actually sort of meditating and checking it out.
Interesting.
So the Supernatural Family Band and Tommy Hancock and Jimmy Dale and a bunch of others were all living in Denver.
Wow, that's an interesting migration.
Yeah. So for me, I mean, that was an instant sort of immersion into that scene.
Okay.
Plus, the Folklore Center was a venue.
Okay.
It had a 100-seat hall at the end of it, and I worked in the repair shop fixing guitars. But here comes Townes Van Zandt, and here comes Norman Blake, and here comes all these people to play.
Yeah.
There's a full calendar of performances every month.
Wow. How neat to be around that, just around those people.
Oh, it was an incredible. Well, and then I would fix their guitars when they came through, or whatever.
That's cool.
So it was a great immersion for me. So when Hot Rize started in '78, and again, because we were not from North Carolina or Nashville, we played locally. We had national ambitions and national plans for sure. And we knew we were a bluegrass band.
Yeah.
And we really respected the traditions of Bill Monroe and the Stanley Brothers and Flatt and Scruggs, and we didn't want to necessarily alter. We didn't want to be a jam band. We didn't want to be a newgrass band. But we wanted to play bluegrass songs that sounded like bluegrass.
Right, and the more traditional sound.
But we also wanted to write songs
Yeah.
and contribute to the canon of bluegrass material.
Yeah.
But what happened inevitably is when you're a young band, you're playing in bars, and in those days it was 9-1, right? You play, you get a gig, it's 9-1. And whether you're in Sheridan, Wyoming, or New Mexico, or Mancos, Colorado, or wherever it is, around 11:30 at night. Hey, you guys know any Hank Williams?
Yeah, exactly.
Hey, you guys play any Bob Wills?
Right, yeah.
You know any Lefty Frizzell?
Yeah.
And the fact is we did. Yeah. So we knew all that material, and so we began to have this schizophrenic life between sort of straight ahead traditional bluegrass, but also we all switched instruments and played traditional honky tonk and classic Western swing music, and that's a direct result of where we were. It's just the fact that we were in the western part of the U.S.
Yeah, and that does seem to be a really big shift. I mean, west of the Mississippi, Texas, all this stuff, you can definitely get a different a feel, like you're talking about Western swing, and the folk music is different. What do you think that is? Is geographic, obviously. So the bluegrass music kind of maybe migrated, and it kept getting changed, mixing with other cultures. Or, I mean, you're more of a historian than me that way.
Yeah, I think the reality is that by the time it gets to my generation, there's not a lot of indigenous music.
Sure.
Even Doc Watson in North Carolina, he was learning music from records.
Right.
So we all learned music from records mostly.
Yeah.
And doesn't mean there weren't pockets of where there were places, but unless you go to Eunice, Louisiana, or New Orleans, or places like that where there really is an absolutely indigenous music.
Yeah.
These are just a bunch of young people who are listening to a lot of records and learning songs and writing songs and hanging out and making bands, and frankly, we didn't think Hot Rize would last very long. We got together for the summer of 1978 because Pete Wernick and Tim O'Brien had both put out solo records.
Wow.
So the idea was, let's make a band and we'll just play some festivals for the summer, and that was the sum total of our commitment.
Yeah.
It was just a summer series, but the combination of the four of us clicked, and it worked, and we were able to put on some good shows, and suddenly we had a record deal with Flying Fish, and we were going to make a record, and then we were touring a lot. And I mean, I joined the band on May 1st of 1978. In our first series of shows were in Jackson, Wyoming, at the Ramada Snow King.
Nice.
5 nights at the Ramada Inn.
That's awesome.
During a weight loss convention. And but literally 2 weeks later, we were playing on Prairie Home Companion.
Wow.
And a month after that, we played at the Telluride Bluegrass Festival.
Wow.
And we traveled the country that summer.
Wow. And that was all pretty organic, like, or
well, Pete Warnick was the banjo
yeah.
player. He was the sort of booking agent.
Okay.
He was good at it, and he got us good gigs. So
Yeah.
he had a lot of drive and forward momentum. But I was 22 years old when the band started, and that was a while ago.
That's so neat. And then and so the also to loop back around to the schizophrenic aspect of Hot Rize. So it's also then Red Knuckles. Those were the guys that came back around 10 or 11, right, to play the Western swing stuff.
Yeah, Red Knuckles and the Trailblazers. We eventually kind of figured out that we, rather than just switching instruments, we could actually just have these other
Different
folks.
identities. Yeah.
And they came out, and it sort of made it a lot more clear.
Yeah.
But we took that music very seriously, and one of the great gratifying pieces of that, even though there was a sort of comedic aspect to the whole Trailblazer thing, we had a real passion for that music and a real appreciation for what it took to make it sound authentic and real.
Yeah.
And one of the great sort of coincidences of that whole chapter was that Leon McAuliffe, who was the original steel guitar player in Bob Wilson's Texas Playboys, Take It Away Leon, Steel Guitar Rag.
Yeah.
He heard our records and became a real fan.
Really?
And so if we were anywhere within 250 miles of Tulsa, he'd show up and sit in.
How neat
and
is
he'd bring
that?
his four-neck steel and
yeah.
set up. We even brought him up to Boulder one night. We played a weekend at Peggy's Hilo, which is an old kind of honky-tonk here. And Leon did 9 to 1.
Wow.
Friday and Saturday nights with us.
That's amazing.
And he said, "You guys are the ones who are playing Western music. Wow. I just want to be around when you guys are playing Western music." So
man, how cool is that? What a stamp of approval too. Golly.
It's amazing.
Yeah.
It's amazing. And the other thing about the Trailblazers being slightly tongue-in-cheek, in terms of at least the presentation, was that it invited all kinds of other people to join in and participate. Yeah. So we had a whole range of fiddle players and singers and other people who would come and join in.
That's cool.
And it was fun. And ultimately that's a fundamental part of both entertaining and music is joyful.
Yeah.
And so to be able, it doesn't mean it can't be thoughtful or insightful.
Sure.
But at the end of the day, it's also can be a joyful experience. And so we were happy about that.
Yeah. That's really neat. So to kind of switch gears then and move towards your life being involved with eTown and starting eTown. So you had the love of the traditional music, obviously. That's why you were involved with Hot Rize. At that early moment, did you also have an awareness or a desire to kind of utilize music to improve the world or to bring light to issues? Or when did that happen?
I grew up in a really beautiful part of the world, in the Hudson River Valley of New York State.
Okay.
And I don't know if you've ever been there.
I've not, no. I'd like to go.
It's just a spectacularly beautiful, the river, I lived in a town called Garrison, and it's where the river kind of curves, and it's right where West Point is. And so I grew up across the river from West Point, tiny little town. Yeah. I lived on a farm that my great-grandparents gave my grandparents as a wedding present. Wow. It's a couple hundred acres up on a ridge overlooking the Hudson. Wow. And it was very rural. We couldn't see another house. I grew up in ponds and fields and haylofts and orchards and stuff. But about not too far away, there were other old-time musicians. John Cohen, who was in a band called the New Lost City Ramblers, he lived nearby. Pete Seeger lived nearby.
Wow.
So when I was a kid, I got to see Pete Seeger really focus his career on cleaning up the Hudson River.
Yeah.
And so he used his music and his skill and his charisma and his experience to bring people together to both raise money and raise awareness around not dumping everything into the Hudson River.
Yeah, exactly.
It's like every open sewer line from every town just went into the river, and all the chemical plants and cement plants. And so he single-handedly really changed the health and safety of that incredibly beautiful and important river.
Yeah.
by building his sloop, the Clearwater, and using music. And so I got to see that when he was the first guy I ever saw play banjo when I was about 5 or 6 years old.
Wow.
And
you got to see it be effective. You got to see it really,
I got to see him do that thing where
Yeah.
he could not just play music, but he played music for a purpose.
Yeah.
And so that was inside me.
Yeah.
So fast forward
Neat.
to 1990, and I'm in a band with Sam Bush and John Cowan, who was also from Newgrass Revival, and a woman from Berkeley, California, named Lori Lewis. And it was put together by the State Department, and we were playing in Turkey and
Really?
Czechoslovakia and Bulgaria, and we did a tour over there. And in 1990, the Berlin Wall just came down in late '89.
Yeah, so it was pretty
So
fresh.
this was fresh, and there was that sense of things being unsettled.
Yeah.
And so that's when I got the idea for eTown, just thinking about our music is bringing people together.
Yeah.
All these people came to the shows.
Yeah.
People who hated each other, didn't get along, were on opposite ends of these political battles. They came to the shows.
It didn't matter, yeah, the music. And what was the style of music? Was traditional bluegrass kind of American?
No, it was an American program. It was like there was some ballads, there was a little swing music, there was some bluegrass, there was contemporary sort of newgrass. It was a variety show, just the four of us put together, and it was cool.
That's really cool. That's a great idea.
And the State Department has been doing that. It's an important part of diplomacy, actually, to take iconic cultural American musicians and artists and export them and let other people see, oh, this is also what America is about.
Yeah.
In places where they may have been told a different story.
No doubt.
And so diplomacy is a big deal.
Yeah.
And so letting the arts and letting music and letting people see up close and personal what American music looks and feels like, I think is really critical, especially now.
Especially now. Yeah.
But at that time it was great, and I was just exposed to all these new. I toured a lot with Hot Rize, and we played a lot, but I'd never toured in Bulgaria or Turkey, for example. And I got to see what happened when the government and industry are exactly the same in a communist country.
Right.
And basically the environment is trashed. So the air was bad, the water was bad, the fields looked bad. Everything just looked like it was unhealthy.
Yeah.
And I have 3 kids. We have 3 kids. And so I came home from that trip committed to just do something about these 2 ideas, the power of music that brings people together, and then finding some way to stimulate some conversation around how we take care of each other and how we take care of the environment.
Yeah.
And so that's where eTown was born the following year. And we've been on the air now for 28 years.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's incredible. And now, how old is this building that we're in right now in Boulder here?
Well, it was originally started in the 20s, but
Sure, yeah.
But we've had it. We bought the building in 2008.
Okay, all right. So a little over 10 years, but this building is kind of, I don't know, it seems to me like almost a pinnacle or a culmination of everything eTown's about. I mean, you're in downtown Boulder. It's a beautiful building, but also sustainable, right? Solar, 100% solar powered.
Solar powered.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, this is it would be disingenuous if we didn't actually walk our talk
That's
after
right.
having this conversation up the air. So
Yeah.
we boxed ourselves in a way, but of course it's what we wanted to do. So
Sure.
And the reality is it didn't add that much to the cost of construction. We literally took the building apart, down to the dirt. It's 17,000 square feet right in the middle of town, and we had to do everything. There was mold and asbestos, and we had to really tear the thing apart. So when it came time to putting the thing back together, we had to make very pragmatic decisions about our values and what kind of carpet we're going to use, what kind of paint we're going to use, what kind of power, what kind of heating and cooling, what kind of light fixtures, what kind of, all of those decisions, which were in my purview. Every decision ultimately has some impact, right?
Yeah. Absolutely.
Every time we buy something, every time we make a decision to engage and support a product or a company or a manufacturing process, we're endorsing it. And so if we endorse the kind of behavior we want to see encouraged,
Right.
then that's a step in the right direction, as opposed to endorsing the kind of behavior we want to see maybe drift away a little bit.
Sure. And 10 years down the road now, it seems like it's doing really well, holding up awesome.
Yeah, the
Don't you think?
building's super solid. Our decision making was good.
Good.
And what's really gratifying, Tyler, is that the building is becoming more and more of what we had hoped it would, which is a kind of a community center.
Sure.
There's a lot of events that happen here that aren't involved with eTown.
Right.
Just places, it's a place where people come together to hear music or see a film or have a meeting or have a wedding or have a party or whatever.
Yeah.
But it's people appreciate the underpinnings of why it's here. And in some cases, people want to make sure that their events or their gatherings happen here because of those values.
Yeah. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah. And the thing I also love about this show is it really is how it comes across to me is kind of what we can agree on, what we can push forward and stuff like that. It's a very positive idea as opposed to what you're against. I don't really hear eTown talking about what they're against a lot. I hear eTown talking about what they're for, which I think is important. And along with that is the Achievement Award is an award you guys give out to folks helping out in the world. How many awards or guests have you had? Do you know over the whole?
Oh man, I don't know, but I mean
a lot,
probably 1,000 or something like that.
Yeah.
The idea behind that is that we didn't want to just talk about the problems and just say, oh my God, the thing is the carbon levels and climate change and global warming and the glaciers are melting and the sea levels are rising and we didn't want to just point out all the problems.
Right.
So and it's easy to be overwhelmed when there are things that are of that scale.
Sure.
So we wanted every week to celebrate small victories, like little stories of people in their towns who just decided to do one thing, and that thing became impactful and it grew and it helped a lot of people, or it shone a light on some issues that we could all get involved with. So there's a lot of divisiveness, and there's a lot of people saying, well, I'm on one side or the other, and we can't talk to each other.
Right.
Because you're on that side and I'm on this side. You listen to MSNBC and I listen to Fox News or vice versa or whatever.
Yeah.
However we choose that dividing line, it's really toxic.
Yeah.
It is not helping. And so my view all along is, okay, we'll put that stuff aside. There are 4 things, pretty easy we can all agree on. Like, number one, if you have kids, you love your kids, right? If you have grandkids, you love your grandkids. We can all agree on that, right?
Sure. Yeah.
If you love your grandkids, you probably want to do what you can to set them up in some way so that they can have a reasonable, shot at having a life as good as the one you've led.
Sure. Yeah.
So that's basically where I'm coming from.
Yeah.
So I'm looking at I have 2 grandchildren now, and I'm thinking about them. So I would feel pretty bad if I didn't at least try to do something that would set them up so that they could lead a life that was anywhere near as joyful and rewarding as the life I've had so far.
Yeah, and everybody can agree on that.
Sure. And that's basically where I'm coming from. So if I get the science that says, man, oh man, they're going to have a hard time by the time it gets to 2050. And if there's anything I can do to try to stem that tide and make it so that it's not so tough for them, I want to learn what that is.
Yeah.
I want to figure out what that is. If it means I have to sacrifice a little, my dad was in World War II, and that they knew how to sacrifice for a bigger cause.
No doubt.
And I'm afraid that as a nation, we've become a little too selfish.
Yeah.
And
comfortable.
And we're not necessarily willing to compromise on behalf of a bigger idea.
Sure.
And the funny thing about this whole renewable energy deal is that it's not really much compromise. I mean, we're sitting here in air-conditioned comfort right now. It's not like we're...
Yeah, well, the technology has come a long way as well in terms of affordability. And at this point right now, it's,
So, I mean, that's just one issue that seems like makes sense to me.
Sure.
There's a bunch of ways that I think we can look out for each other and use common sense rather than our political dividing lines to try to solve some problems. Sure. But eTown isn't really about actually forcing people to do anything or preaching. It's just saying, come and listen to some great music.
Yeah.
And along the way, we're going to have some conversations, some storytelling around some people who are doing great things.
Yeah.
And it is, as you say, super positive. And at the end of the show, I'll bet most people will think a little differently about something, either a kind of music they weren't exposed to before, or a way of thinking about, any number of issues that were raised on the show. So,
Sure.
it makes sense to me, and obviously it's been making sense to our radio station partners and our listeners all these years, or we wouldn't still be on the air.
Yeah, no, and it's amazing. And you're all across the country and also internationally. Are there stations playing you guys?
Yeah, there are stations around the country. We're on about 300 stations in the U.S. and a lot of places around and of course we have a lot of podcast subscribers.
Mm-hmm.
We've got 1 million views a month on our YouTube channel.
That's awesome.
So I think our audience is growing, and our online presence is certainly growing.
Yeah.
And no, I feel like we're in a good spot, because ultimately people do want to be connected.
Yeah.
People want to be in community.
Yeah.
And we get so isolated.
No, I totally agree with that. And you just go to any concert or whatever, and you see that it doesn't matter who you are or what you're doing. It's like you're all there together, and
Exactly.
you're vibing in between the artists, and that's amazing.
Music does that like no other art form.
Yeah, I agree.
Because you're all focused. If you're at a festival, if it rains on everybody.
Right.
You share this experience, and you're all focused at the stage. Everybody's aiming at the stage.
Yeah.
And so this energy happens where it comes from the stage and comes to the audience and goes back to the artist.
Yeah.
And even if you don't know it, it opens your heart.
Yeah.
It opens your heart, and you're having a shared experience. Music is powerful that way.
Yeah. It's like if you can just find one commonality, right? Like you're saying, even that simply, everybody's facing the same direction.
Yeah.
It's like we're all facing the same direction. Start from there and build. Yeah, that's
I started a new thing here also called Hippy Bluegrass Church.
Oh, right, I heard about this.
And Hippy Bluegrass Church is along the same lines. It's basically, we sing a lot of traditional sort of bluegrass gospel songs and other songs. We have a live bluegrass band. We typically have some black gospel singers, and we project the lyrics up on a screen, so
Neat.
Everyone sings along.
That's really neat. And you're doing that here at
We've done it here. I've done it at the Boulder Theater. I've did it at Rocky Grass this last weekend.
Awesome.
And then about every 3 or 4 songs, I read some poetry.
Wow.
And it's typically the same kind of thing. It's uplifting. It's poetry from all kinds of sources and across the ages.
Yeah.
And I've found that it's really important for people to come together in community and sing.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of people who don't go to church anymore.
Right.
And that doesn't mean they don't want to come together in community and sing.
Sure, and sing, yeah.
And so I'm finding that that's a really, really strong need in lots of communities. And so we're going to grow it, and we're going to take it to other cities and make Hippy Bluegrass Church thing a real thing too.
That's awesome. I love that idea. Yeah, because we all need that, spiritual rejuvenation from whatever source you can get it from.
Yeah.
And when you combine it with music, it's definitely powerful. More
Well,
powerful.
the other thing is that, even if you are church going, a lot of churches feel that their path is the exclusive path.
Sure.
And that other paths are not valid.
Yeah.
And they're totally entitled to that perception. But our goal is that everybody's welcome.
Sure.
And so whatever your background, whatever your faith, whatever your history, we can still come together and make a joyful noise.
Yeah. I like the joyful noise. That's right. That's what we're all after. That's really cool. So I wonder, being in this game on both sides, the radio kind of production side and also the musician side, how have you seen? I guess my question is, how have you seen the maybe the industry change?
Oh boy!
Right, but then also, how have you seen it not change? You know what I mean?
Yeah, I think the real answer is scale.
Okay.
Like if you think about at the top, at the biggest, highest level of the music business, that's pretty well gone.
Right.
At least in the genres and the things that I'm exposed to. When we started eTown, there were powerful record companies, powerful radio stations, powerful managers, And as that changes, now what's happening is there are powerful agents because it's all about the touring,
yeah.
and the powerful promoters.
Right.
And so that's where the power shift has kind of happened in the music business. But as I was saying before, if you think about scale, below the radar, it hasn't really changed that much.
Yeah.
You know, we're still, if you're a guy or a gal who can sing a song and write a song and put on a show and sell 200 tickets and travel around the country and sell your merch after the show, and it's exactly the same.
Right.
Only maybe a little easier because you now have a Facebook page, and you can build an audience online, so you can independently develop a following that you don't have to do just by grinding it out, playing shows all the time.
Yeah.
So I think in some ways, you know, in that lower scale of 200 seats to 400 seats, you know, I look at somebody like Leo Kottke, you know, a great guitar player. His world is unchanged.
Yeah.
He likes to drive himself to the shows. He gets out with his two guitars. He plays a gig, and you know, he can sell any number of tickets.
Sure.
But he's playing. You know, the Boulder Theater was 800 seats,
Right.
and so he's in that sort of 500 to 1,000 seats. Yeah. He can travel around. He can play however many shows he wants, and he can make a good living.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so he doesn't need a Columbia record contract. He doesn't need a high-powered manager. He can do his thing however long he wants to do it.
Which is pretty cool, and almost in some ways to me that's way more appealing to me as an artist to be able to do that. I mean, I think that size show is really fun. I like that.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you sort of have to get out of the house concert scale.
Sure.
So you can get to at least a couple hundred seats.
Yeah, sure.
In order to make the numbers work, really. But the fact is, we are all lucky. We get to express ourselves. We get to write songs, sing songs, play music, travel around, see our friends.
Yeah.
You know, we get to be part of a community, and it's in some ways an incredible gift.
Yeah.
And
absolutely.
And so the fact that we can sustain it over the years, I feel incredibly grateful and fortunate that I've been able to stay in and around the music business and even connect my values to my skills as a musician, which is not everybody gets to do.
No, that's a really unique thing.
Yeah. No, I feel super lucky. And again, Colorado and being in the West, I think has changed bluegrass music substantially. Like the Telluride Bluegrass Festival has been for more than 40 years a great melting pot of these different influences. And so, it makes sense to have Bill Monroe or Alf Stanley or Hot Rize, but it also makes sense to have Willie Nelson or James Taylor or Newgrass Revival, of course, has been there all the time. But this collision of styles that happens at Telluride is one of the reasons why it's so healthy.
Yeah.
And it's not to say that some absolutely traditional bluegrass festivals aren't healthy, because they can be if that audience can sustain them.
Sure.
But in many cases, that audience is aging.
Yeah.
And so I think the West has given bluegrass more of an open mind in general. And that doesn't necessarily mean all the music that comes out of this is technically bluegrass, because as you know, it's, you know, there's a lot of various,
blended,
you know, is String Cheese Incident a bluegrass band? No,
No.
they're not. But I think there is that open Western sensibility. Yeah. You know, if you think about Western swing, what Bob Wills was doing was a total collision.
Yeah, jazz, right? I mean, it's basically jazz.
Well, it was blues.
Yeah.
It was Appalachian fiddle tunes.
Okay.
It was the sort of Tex-Mex polka.
Right.
It was big band swing.
Yeah.
And it was you know, work songs that he'd heard as a kid, folk songs. It was all this thing was a complete collision of all these different styles that came out Western swing.
Yeah.
But it wasn't one thing, and it was inclusive, and it was fun.
Yeah.
And so I think there is an opportunity in the West to, because it is a more recently populated part of the world,
Right.
and because people come from other places, it inevitably is going to be a melting pot.
Yeah. And to me, it's also like, a little bit of the pioneering spirit kind of hangs over.
Sure.
You could have easily just stayed on the other side of the river, but you decided not to. You decided to keep
Right.
going into the unknown.
Yeah, so the folks, who, for the last, 150 years, the people who've been coming out here have been one way or another seekers.
Yeah.
Some of them have been seekers for money, some of them have been seekers for space, some of them have been running away from whatever they were running away from. But there is that kind of seeking that's in the DNA of people who wind up in the West.
Yeah.
And the other, the other piece of it is the landscape.
Yeah, the expansiveness. Or
Just
drama.
The big sky, the scale of the West, the scale of the vista. It invites those bigger ideas and bigger dreams in some ways.
Yeah, I think that's a very good point. You have to have that expansiveness to allow yourself to take a second to think about those things. Yeah. So what's on the horizon then? More of the same, or
for
new
me,
exciting things?
For me, it's always. I have a couple of things that are pretty solid. Hot Rize is taking a breather this year, so I'm not touring with Hot Rize this year. And, after 41 and a half years, we've done a lot.
Yeah.
We've been a band that's been busy and we've accomplished a lot.
Yeah.
So I don't know that there's much more for us to prove.
Sure.
And we're all individually busy and productive in our own ways.
Yeah, a lot of solo careers and such.
So everybody's got stuff. Yeah. So eTown is, I'm super excited about this year. eTown seems to be growing up a little bit. We've got some new people on staff. In theory, I can start pulling back a little bit. Helen and I can both start pulling back a little bit and
That's great.
turn things over to the staff a little more. Still be involved with the show and the organization, but start that process of handing off. And whether it's Hippy Bluegrass Church, I'm starting another band with some local guys, a couple of them who were in the band called the Subdudes.
Oh, yeah.
And we've been writing and recording and doing that. I just produced a record with Tim O'Brien and Bill Frisell and their guitar teacher. He's a great jazz guitar teacher and player named Dale Bruning, who I think is now 84 years old. But I put Dale in the studio with two of his former students, Tim O'Brien and Bill Frisell.
Is that?
And so that record is coming out soon. I have the opportunity to produce here in the studio, so
Right, and you do have a full service recording studio in this building as well, right?
that's right.
Yeah.
So Big Head Todd and the Monsters and Yonder Mountain String Band and Elephant Revival, and a lot of the local artists have been making records here. So
That's awesome.
so my goal is to try to focus a little more on my own musical journey.
Yeah.
I want to become a student again.
Yeah.
So I'm really interested in I was inspired by this guitar player I heard last night playing with Suzanne Vega, who I thought was amazing. And, I get inspired by people all the time.
Yeah.
And so I want to always try to get better. I want to write more songs. I want to, produce and record and tour and play shows and try to keep it all going.
That sounds pretty fun. I like it.
Yeah.
Well, I'll be looking forward to hearing what comes out.
Thanks,
of that.
Tyler. Well,
Cool.
congratulations to you also on your journey, because
Thank you.
all the things we've been talking about, which is this seeking and this ambition and this trying to connect to an audience and try to be productive and creative in your own right. You're doing all that stuff too.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm trying to take your advice to heart. You gave me some very good advice a while ago, and if anybody's listening as an artist or aspiring, I think honestly it applies to anybody, but the 4 things you have to keep in mind, the 4 different hats. Do you remember that advice?
A little bit.
A little bit, yeah. Yeah, I mean, the gist of it was your 4 things, right? You got to be a dreamer and, a pragmatist, and then I forget the other 2 things. So I'm just sticking with the dreamer and pragmatist now. I'm joking. But yeah, that was really good advice to begin with.
I'm lucky in that I have the ability to look back on a bunch of things I've done and mistakes I've made and things that didn't work out, and so, I mean, ultimately that's what a community is too. A community is made up of elders and youngsters and folks in the middle, and if you continue to talk to each other, there's opportunities to learn in every direction. I learn from my grandkids. I learn from these young artists who come on eTown and are
Yeah.
just starting out. I get inspired by all kinds of people.
That's neat.
Yeah.
Yeah, never stop learning, and you can always find inspiration.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, thanks for spending some time talking to me about this, and we'll see you down the road.
Sounds good, Tyler.
Okay, thanks, Nick.
All right. Well, thanks for listening. If you want to find out more information about Hot Rize, you can visit HOTRIZE.com. You can also look them up on all the streaming services and your local record stores and all that good stuff. Go check out their music. Seriously, it's really awesome bluegrass. Now, to learn more about eTown and what Nick is doing with that, you can visit town.org. And you can find out all about their guests. They have lots of cool video, so definitely explore that. And tune in. They're on commercial and non-commercial radio stations across the country, so listen when you can. As always, you can visit cowboysindians.com, search the name of this podcast, Tales from the Trail, or search my name, Tyler, Tyller. You can find more episodes. I'm sitting down with a lot of different folks, so go search that. If you want to find out more information on my music, you can visit Tyler, Tyller, music.com. You can also find me on Instagram and YouTube that way. Just search Tyler with 2 L's. Speaking of YouTube, if you're listening to this on your phone as a podcast, there is also a video companion to go along with this. So cruise on over to YouTube and search it. Or you can also find that on Cowboys Indians site. And if you're watching the video and you want to just listen to the audio only, you can go to your favorite podcasting platforms and subscribe. Thanks for listening. I really appreciate it. I hope you're enjoying them.